Welcome everyone to the first episode of the Modern Tech Stack with Versori. I'm really excited to have here today Mark Johnson, who is the Chief Product Officer at BigTime. Mark, it's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So to start, it'd be great just to start with kind of a little bit of an intro, bit of background on yourself, what brought you to BigTime, how long you've been there, and your kind of role as the CPO at the company.
Awesome. So Mark Johnson, I've been at BigTime almost 3 years now. I lead our product and UX team, and BigTime itself is a professional services automation platform. We help our customers make smarter decisions and ultimately drive profitability. I love that particular tagline. It's something I've done in a lot of my career, just for different industries, spent time at Deluxe in payments and SaaS, in particular payroll, HR technology. So really helping customers improve productivity of their staff and drive retention. Also spent a number of years at Home Depot leading product teams for field services, and think about like roofers and windows installers, ones that are in the field their entire day and do not want to be spending their day working on their laptop. So really working on tools to make them more productive and again, drive profitability. Also spent a little bit of time in consulting. So get to live the persona of who we serve today at BigTime.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, super interesting space. Like before this job, I used to be a VC. And so spent a lot of time looking at the kind of frontline workforce, and particularly like the industrial workforce tooling. And Home Depot was always a company we looked to in terms of they'd already begun that journey a decade ago before the kind of VC world got interested in these, plumbers and electricians and builders, etc. So must be a pretty interesting time to be at Home Depot.
Yeah, and even back when I started there, if you think about this stat, there was 2 to 3% of total sales were actually driven online. So now, of course, that script has flipped, and you can even buy roofing installation and the product associated with it online. So it's amazing to see how much that industry has changed, but still has a long way to go too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's still definitely, I feel like we're just starting to see some of those tools go mainstream in terms of some of these more modern workforce tooling platforms. So it's going to be a super interesting time. And I think one thing that I've really seen from an investment perspective, as we've looked at that space, is the influence of some of these new AI tools that are starting to come in. And of course, BigTime has just announced your new BigTime AI product. So we'd love to kind of start there. How is BigTime thinking about AI, particularly considering your customer base, being consultants, being design firms, being all sorts of kind of professional services companies where you guys handle huge volumes of, or your customers handle huge volumes of unstructured data as well as structured data. So would love just to know, what is BigTime doing in terms of AI, and where do you see the next kind of 1 to 2 years going for the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've been on our journey like a lot of other SaaS companies, and that journey has been rapidly advancing. We, like others, started with, hey, we want to help our customers be more productive in our platform. So we started with your typical Gen AI knowledge experience where you can have an assistant that can help you with tips and tricks of how to use BigTime. To your point, BigTime does a lot for a professional services organization, everything from how do I create a project, to tasks, to assigning those tasks, to getting paid for that, to creating an invoice, the expense entries, the time entries. All of that data lives in BigTime and those respected workflows. So we started first kind of dabbling with the assistant experience, but we realized customers also need help on just how do I get more insights out of BigTime. And we've been on this next, I'll call it the next step in the journey of copilots. We think of them as partners, teammates to our customers, different roles within our customer's organization, different tasks within their organization, but it's definitely top of mind. And of course, the agentic side too, of how do you get to the point where AI is not being brought in, but AI is kind of leading the charge. And then there is a human who is still there to review, approve, submit, but AI is now doing the grunt work. So we have started to think about AI in this evolution from assistants to co-pilots to agents. And we still see value, which is interesting. We still see value in continuing to build out the assistant model, at the same time moving as fast as we can into the next two layers.
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned the kind of layers of AI, because at a company, of your scale, the time it takes to mobilize a product team and a tech team and an engineering team, build these things out. And you look at the AI world, it feels like OpenAI is releasing a model a month at this point.
Yeah.
And then they've got all these text models, and then suddenly they drop the operator model, and you're like, wait, now I can do like a whole range of new things. So I'm intrigued to know, how are you thinking through positioning how BigTime operates as a company from a product development perspective to try and keep up with the kind of rate of change in the AI space?
Yeah, it is definitely one of the biggest challenges we have. And I think there's definitely a positive to that challenge, because we are seeing the glimpses of productivity improvement across our product and engineering team. The challenge we see is, think about the old ways of going through a roadmap planning process and the months it would take to pull all of that data together, to involve customers, involve stakeholders, to ultimately come back with business plans and a financial plan associated with what are you going to invest in for that next year. And with the way we're using Gen AI, like the data aggregation, that's not the easy part. We're talking about hours, if not a couple of days, to pull what would have taken weeks worth of data altogether and actually drive insights. So on the product team side, we are seeing immediate productivity benefits on making sure we are prioritizing the right stuff and we're doing so efficiently. Where we have challenge is, to your point, with how fast the models are advancing, where there are certain experiences that we're working on right now that would never have even made our investment cut line, because it would have taken us 3 or 4 months to go and build it. And at that point, we're not seeing enough of a return for all of that engineering cost. If we can now do that in 3 or 4 days, that changes the story significantly.
Yeah.
And we have one of our senior engineers who literally just did that on a Friday afternoon and created a whole new expense extraction process where, look, if we can now complete 80% of the expense form with just 6 hours of work, we can get the other 20% with just a couple more days. And it's like, hey, we now have a full-fledged agentic expense process where the person who needs to complete that form and ultimately get it approved is only reviewing to make sure they don't have any changes, and they can hit go. And even better, if we can make it easier on the approval side, where, look, there's a full loop, that again changes the way we would have prioritized in the past of, hey, look, we'll focus on the staffer here for this quarter, and then maybe we'll get to the approver in the next quarter. Now we might be able just to do both in a matter of weeks, as opposed to 2 quarters worth of work previously. So it's definitely challenging the way we think about planning and road mapping, even the way we run sprints, to be honest. So I think that's the part that's probably positive, but also scary, to try to keep re-envisioning how does product and engineering work in this new AI era.
Yeah. And for me, so switching out of product slightly, I think there's a really big conversation going on across everybody who's not in product and not in tech about how do you position the business using AI tools to compete in an AI-enabled space. We do a huge amount of work in commerce and retail. The thing, and being an integration platform, the thing we're seeing is everybody's now talking about deployment time. Why do I need to spend 9 months and $500,000 doing all this implementation if I can knock out 50% that would have been the tech work, because I can code really quickly with LLMs, and I can use Versori to build integrations or whatever that might look like. So I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, beyond product, what are the other parts of the business that you see the team doubling down on to try and maintain pace with competition, considering this kind of AI surge?
Yeah, I think a big one we're starting to double down on is culture and people. And you need champions at the end of the day. Like product, if it's just product and engineering who are thinking about AI, your company's not going to be successful. As we've talked about, there are so many tools in the market right now that are driving different niche use cases of productivity gains, or frankly, just helping you make better decisions than you would have been able to before. If we think about, hey, there are custom GBTs we can now create for our sales team that says, hey, let's feed a bunch of data on why we have lost these deals to these competitors. You can create battle cards in a matter of seconds, and you can actually keep it real time too if you build it correctly. So the way we're thinking about implementing those across our functions is leading with a group of people that we call our BigTime AI champions, who are across departments, who are living and breathing different tools, different use cases, and sharing best practices each day. Because we still see, hey, maybe we have, let's call it 40% of our company using AI in their day-to-day. How do we keep growing that? And how do we get everybody a little bit more comfortable? Because that's the hardest thing, is how do you get started if you're not familiar with the tools themselves? How do you even prompt if you're not familiar with that? So that's where we have invested in this team of individuals to lead the charge. And really, we can't just think about it in terms of AI in our product. Like, we have to think about it as an AI enabled company. And that goes back to the people and the culture that you start to build.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that in theory filters down to your customer base too. It's something that, going back to our focus on retail and commerce, we engage with a lot. Is a lot of these retail leaders are not from an AI first generation. This is all quite new to them. They are part of quite large, slow moving organizations as is. Trying to educate them on how to, like, this is not just a cool tool that does cool things. It's like there's cost benefit in it. There's revenue line benefit. So beyond the, these AI champions, how else are you guys kind of looking at educating your customer base as you kind of push BigTime AI?
Yeah, it's definitely one we are thinking a lot about, because we do have customers who are not ready to make that jump yet, and which is why transparency is so key. Like, as an example, we launched a resourcing agent experience where the resource manager can actually have their profiles for a job set up, and AI can come back with an evaluation of who would be best fit for that profile, but also explain the why. And that's key for us to get adoption, because I could come back and say, George, you should be recommended for this profile over Susie. But if I'm not explaining the why, then I'm probably not building trust and credibility with you. So it's almost like, how do you teach customers how to fish that aren't as familiar? And then you can start to expand beyond that. So we're trying to be very, I guess, logical in how we approach the evolution. And in some cases, if you go too far, too fast, like, you will alienate some group of customers. So it's definitely a balancing act of, and maybe this goes back to product management 101, like, hey, you want to drive adoption, you want to drive awareness, you want to drive success. And there is a way to do so just using the fundamentals of, hey, did I apply the proper research? Did I think about the user experience in the right way? Am I communicating back with customers, because a launch never ends that life cycle? So it's really making sure, hey, we all still apply those muscles, even if we can code and deploy faster than we've ever been able to.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think that's what's super interesting is everything here is an accelerant, but it doesn't void the fundamentals. Like it's still at the basic level, it's still, no matter how fast the AI can move, it is still about when particularly the big time where you are dealing with human services type companies, professional services organizations, there's still that human learning curve that needs to occur, even if the AI can be turned on and running in a second.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, think about like, hey, there's always this concept of back to basics, like your fundamentals are what ultimately keep the lights on, even with the advancement of AI and modern workflows. Like, hey, we still have to bring back what got us here to begin with, and have that in the back of our head during this time of rapid change.
Yeah. So I have two more questions. One a little more quick fire, but the first one actually quite aligned to this. The CEO of Klarna came out a few months ago, dropped the big bombshell. We're scrapping Salesforce, we're scrapping Workday. My engineers built it in-house in seconds or in a few weeks. You know, we don't need them anymore. We can build it exactly how we want. It does exactly what we need. It cuts cost. Some pretty, big hitting statements when we still live in an era where, Salesforce powers most of the modern enterprise world. I'm curious, kind of, as a CPO, as a product leader, do you think there's legs to that argument? Do you think it's a bit more of a media play than it is reality? I'm just curious, like, what you're on saying that.
I definitely think it's a little bit of both. I think there is obviously, the tech world loves a good story like this, when you can take a huge gorilla in the space and say, you know what, I don't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars anymore to keep running on this enterprise software. At the same time, majority of companies are not the size of Klarna either, or have the size of engineering group that they have at their disposal. So there is definitely this concept of, you should think about from a internal perspective, again, what should I build versus what should I buy, and where is the best time spent across my team, and obviously the cost model associated with it. At the same time, there is a reason why the Salesforce or the Workdays or BigTime, for that matter, exist, and it goes back to our knowledge, data, best practices, domain expertise. And if we ever lose sight of that, that's when we're in trouble. If Salesforce ever loses sight of that, that's when they're in trouble. And I think that's the part that's key for the companies that are in enterprise SaaS. But then for the ones that are using those products, it's probably a hybrid approach, to be honest. I mean, maybe there are certain tools that I don't need anymore. At the same time, there's also interesting stats coming out. I know BCG just had one published last month where you would assume with AI, there are less softwares in your tech stack, but it's actually growing. And it's presenting a new opportunity as you think about, which I think is actually where Versori shines too. Like in this connected ecosystem, maybe there is a tool that I use for a foundation, but now maybe I can plug in more tools. And again, if that foundation has access to all of my data and that domain expertise, but I can now use more best of breed tools, it's kind of like, hey, are we flipping the script again? Like if you think about interesting technology cycles, like best of breed was great, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and then it kind of dropped off. Does it come back again? Like everything kind of flips the script a little bit. So it is one that is really fascinating to follow right now. And still, I don't think there is a good answer yet, other than look, there's a little bit of both. You can kind of be a hybrid approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, from a general being in the connectivity tech space, I think it was maybe a slightly misinterpreted statement. I think if you look under the hood of what the Klarna CEO was saying was like, those systems historically are monolithic systems. They are very big. They work how they want you to work. And we're switching to a world, if we've gone from systems of record and everybody's now talking about systems of agents,
Yeah.
where the system of record is baked in, but how that system of record functions from a workflow perspective can be much more composable because the agents are intelligent, they can compose their own workflows, and UI has just improved to the point at which a lot of these tools now come with workflow engines just built in at the UI layer. I think maybe while it was a big hitting statement, actually what it just spoke to was that trend was they need something that fits better for their business. And these tools are too monolithic to do that. Moving to some form of core workflow tool that allows them to have that more composable approach, and therefore a system of agents, a system of intelligence, I think it's probably actually spoke to that trend as much as the media didn't touch on that too much.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of what he said was so loud from that perspective.
Yeah. And it goes back to when they first started talking about this, no one was really talking about agents. Very few people were. And now, like every other article you read on Gen AI is talking about getting to agentic systems and workflows. And it's not just one agent. Like there could be, I don't know, if you take a finance department as an example, there could be 6 agents that now have to be connected and working with each other to complete a workflow. And the amount of opportunity that brings is all the productivity savings you get from these agents that can run 24/7. At the same time, hey, there's where do I want to be spending my time as a human who was a part of that team before? Now I can spend it toward more strategic stuff. And we're trying to think about the same thing in BigTime. Like no one wants to go and complete a timesheet or an expense entry. Like, hey, that's just table stakes for us to reimagine what that experience looks like. So then, hey, we can surface up more insights that you can actually take action on. And that's where we want our customers. Like they're paid for their brains at the end of the day. And we want them to spend more time with clients, spend more time delivering great projects. So whatever we can do to help them get that time back and make better decisions, that's where we think we can really make a difference in the space too.
Yeah, no, I mean it'll be interesting to see it unfold. We will, as I said, being in that connectivity space, we get a bit of a front row seat to seeing people approach us all the time of like, can you stitch these systems together so I can overlay this workflow, whether that's AI enabled or not. So I want to move on. Last couple of questions to a little bit of kind of quick fire. So what I'd kind of love to know is one, either tool or startup, kind of younger company that you're looking at that is particularly intriguing to you, that you use day to day, kind of for your job, that you're looking at in your industry, and if you have one that you're kind of looking at or using in your personal life.
Yeah, let's see. I'll give you one that I've started to use a little bit more recently. Like most product managers are probably used to using ChatGPT or you name it for writing PRDs. Again, an example where not the best use of our time, and you can drive so much savings by just starting with a good prompt and then good information to build there. Now, the part that I like is, hey, can you now use something like V0 and go and actually create a prototype? And when you can do that, it really challenges the way you thought about the PRD. And maybe if I start to just design and visualize something as a PM without actually having to use an engineer's time, that's going to challenge me to then go back and figure out, hey, am I solving the job to be done? Do I have the right problem statement and potential solution in mind, or do I need to go back to the drawing board? That has never existed up until more recently, and it's a great way to just say, look, now I'm ready, or now I'm not ready to go to our engineering counterparts.
Yeah, no, we both went to Georgia Tech. I guess that's the connection we haven't made yet. Now producing the most AI talent of any school in the country, if not in the world. Like, I think most of my class moved to San Francisco to work at AI companies.
Yeah.
But I'm not a coder. I'm not an engineer. I'm one of the few that studied in the business school. And while the engineers love to point that out, I think the tooling that I can now go to Lovable, I can go to Versori, I can go to any tool, and I can put something in, and it spits out a V1 prototype, an MVP, in a matter of seconds. Is truly incredible. And so I think it's gonna be super exciting to see how this kind of suite of businesses crop up that aren't VC backable, that aren't huge multi-$100 million businesses, but are little tools and tips that make solo entrepreneurs a very decent amount of money, but are built without the need for engineers, or at least with very, very minimal input, because of how good some of this tooling is getting.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, Mark, it was great to have you. I really, really appreciate the time, and look forward to chatting soon.
Yeah, thanks, George. It was fun.